Good day everyone and happy new year to you. Today I'll be making a tutorial video of Uchiha Sasuke igniting his Chidori, and I will take you through the process. But first and foremost, I would like to inform you that this is not a tutorial video for flipper clip. However, my explanations here are also equally useful for flipper clip. Today I'll be using the rough animator program, and I'll be using it to explain my process and how I consider factors like shading when there's a light source like the Chidori. So I wouldn't want this video to be too long. I'll just address the key points. And with that said, let's get into it. So for the first part of your animation process, you want to work on the rough, and this will just show you the position of your character and how you want the angle to look like. When you are done making your rough, you go over, reduce the opacity, and then you sketch over it as well. The sketch is also important because it helps you to guide your outline very well. The reason why I want to do the sketch and just don't go straight into the outline is because anytime you are making your animations, there's a lot of zooming in involved. And when you are zooming in, it becomes difficult for you to keep your perspectives constant to the overall drawing. But when you zoom out, there's a way you can keep your perspective of your character when you're moving on to the next frame very constant. And that's why in the rough you have much more freedom to make your mistakes just to give the outline. But it's your sketch layer basically serves as the guide for you to now trace your outline. Now, for those of you that are following and are very observant and are looking into the screen, not just listening to my voice in the background, you will notice that there is a small box at the top right corner of the screen. And this is not a feature that comes with the app, but it's actually a feature, a useful tool that comes with the device I'm using, which is a Samsung Galaxy Tab S7. And anytime you're making a character like this, that is not your original character, it's always very important for you to have a reference image so that you can keep everything right. Now, I advise as an animator that you shouldn't necessarily go for a very accurate reference. It's important for you to add your own uniqueness and your own style of drawing into the image you're working on, except you are working on a studio where things like this is very important, that you get the proportion of the characters right. When you are doing your own video, maybe you want to make a parody of a different character in a different animation, it's good to add your unique style because people tend to be interested in seeing their characters in different styles. If they wanted to see the original way it is being drawn, then they will obviously watch the movie where it's coming from. So but it's important for you to, notwithstanding, have that reference at the corner. So once you're satisfied with the way your sketch looks, then you can go over your outline, and this part you need to be much more precise than you were with your sketch. And so a lot of zooming in is usually involved in this stage of animation. It's always advisable that you zoom in as less as possible, because the less you zoom, the faster you can complete your animation. But experienced animators and artists that have been doing digital drawing know that the more you zoom, the much more precise you are than when you zoom out. So because of precision, you tend to zoom a lot. But notwithstanding, you just have to have this healthy balance between precision and speed, because we all know that animation can be very time consuming, and yeah, so we just want to get these things done as quickly as possible anytime you're animating. So right now I'll just be going over the outline and just drawing over it. Now, for those of you that are familiar with Sasuke Uchiha, you know he has this rope that he ties around his waist that looks really cool. And now that we have gotten to that part where we want to draw it, there are different ways in which you can draw it. You can decide to draw the outlines that exist between the ridges of that rope, you can connect them, which is fine if that's what you're going for, or you can leave them open the way I'm doing. Now if you look into the ridges of that rope, you can see that the way I'm drawing it, I'm not connecting the ridges of that, the line that will indicate the ridges of that rope, I'm not connecting them together. I'm leaving a tiny gap between those lines. So this is sort of a stylistic approach, but at the same time it also helps to save time when you get to the coloring phase, because if you close the gaps of those ridges with the line, then it means you have to fill in the individual how can I put it, like, is it the bands that make up the belts? You shall know that between those ridges, I don't know how to explain it, but I think when we get to the coloring phase, those of you who don't get my explanation right now would understand better. So, but it's just, trust me, this is a process that makes the coloring phase faster. So whenever you come across maybe something like this in your animation, you might want to leave those ridges, you might want to leave gaps between the ridges so that it will make your coloring a lot faster. So another problem that people encounter when they are drawing is drawing fingers. This is a very common problem that every artist, even those that become very professional, would have to surmount. So when it comes to drawing fingers, there are different ways you can approach it, but I won't want to explain that in today's tutorial video. All I will just tell you is that use references whenever you can and just don't freestyle it. When I made my own animation, I didn't really use a reference for it, and this is because I've been drawing fingers and arms for a very long time. So that's just how it is. Even AI struggle with fingers, but I learned that they are really getting good these days. So if an AI application that is built by humans can actually figure it out, then you should have a little bit of faith in yourself that you eventually get very good at drawing fingers. So just practice and you'll become really good at it. Now, let me just add this. Anytime you are hoping to get better at animation, it's very important for you to watch as much tutorial video as you can and look at the process at which others used to achieve their very interesting animation. And I know this is already obvious to you. The fact that you're watching this video means that you want to improve. But another thing that I think is very crucial to improving your animation is having a competitive mindset. Now, this is not one that should stem from hate, but from genuine love for the craft. When you have a competitive mindset and you see an animation that is very better or far more gorgeous than yours, always strive to improve and get to that level of animation and see whether you can do better. For instance, when you're looking at my animations, challenge yourself and try as much as possible to see whether you can do it better than I can. This is something that I think is helpful in catapulting your progress. For instance, when I started animating on Clip, one of the very first times I made my animation, I was very impressed with myself and I saw what I've done and I felt I was the best. Then towards the tail end of the Clip competition, I saw artworks that blew my mind and I was wondering if such a thing could genuinely be achieved on Clip. And that actually pushed me to strive to do better, to be the first, to be the best. And even though I wasn't the best, I at least improved. So it is just important for you to have that kind of mindset. Now back to the animation. This aspect of the animation I'm drawing is a smear frame. Now smear frames do not necessarily need to conform to the form of what you're trying to draw, but you have to draw it in such a way that it captures the element of speed. So the edges tend to be distorted and extend at the direction in which the animation is coming from or the direction which the animation is going. So it's a very useful tool when you are doing 2D animations and you want to convey that element of speed. Now that I'm done with the outline, the next process usually for me is to add the shadows. So I'm going to make my layer of the Chidori visible and make it act as a guide for how I'm actually going to apply my shadow. And the reason why this is important is because the Chidori is a light source, and that means it's going to affect the way the shadow looks on the character depending on the location which the Chidori is. You can see from the animation that it lifts this Chidori, it lifts his arms up before igniting the Chidori close to his face, which means that the Chidori is going to affect the way the light interacts with his face. Now, after creating the shadow layer, the first thing I'm going to do is to make sure that the shadow conforms to the natural light of the environment, because the Chidori has not yet been activated. So we just draw what the shadow would normally look like at this current state. Now, what the shadow looks like before the Chidori is ignited is subject to where you want your light source to be, depending on the environment you want to place your character in. And right now I'm just operating with the premise that the light source is coming from the sun, which is directly above him. So that's just what I'm going to do now. So another thing is that let's go back to this issue of Sasuke lighting his Chidori. As you can see in this previous frame, there is no Chidori ignited yet, but in this next frame you see the Chidori come up. Now you have to take into account the effect of the light coming from the Chidori on Sasuke's face. So you want to make sure your shadow reflects that there is a different light source coming in. Now you don't have to be very rigid with your light source when it comes to animation, because it's sort of stylized, but you want to keep some properties of reality in it. So let's say this is the Chidori lighting up Sasuke's face. You know that there was a shadow in the previous face below his nose, but now that the light source is coming here very close to his face, all that is gone. So let me just put a little bit of light here. Then you can still make sure that inside his collar is dark, because the outside part of the collar is shielding the inside part from that light, so it's casting a shadow within the collar. And therefore the other sides, the light source is pushing the shadow back, so maybe there's less intensity. And sometimes you want to even put shadow in places where shadows do not exist before, just for the cool factor of it. Now that we are done applying the shadows for the first part of the Chidori getting ignited, we're going to use the onion skin as a guide for the next shadow we want to apply onto the next frame. And the reason we are doing this is because we do not want the shadow to be too consistent, because the Chidori is a flickering light source, which means the light source is not too stable and the light source is shaking. So because of that, the light source is also going to affect the stability of the shadow that is being casted on Sasuke. So you can try as much as possible to retain that, how can I put it, the initial structure of what the shadow looks like. It's being casted to the back, it's closer to the face, so the light source is coming from this place. But you just have to work on the extension of the shadow. So there are parts where you push the shadow back a little bit, or maybe you extend it forward a little bit, but it still obeys that basic structure of where the shadow is being casted. Now look at how I extend the shadow at the elbow side, but it's not too much. It still obeys that previous structure of the shadow in the previous frame. So it's going to give it a flickering sort of shadow when we are done with the final animation. And that concludes adding the shadow to Sasuke Uchiha after adding the Chidori. Hopefully I'll be able to work on a follow-up tutorial video where I'll be applying the colors and the backgrounds and maybe explaining how the light source affects that as well. And for those of you that are curious, the animation took me about 2 hours 30 minutes to complete. So thanks for watching this far, and God bless you.